Hey, welcome back.
Hello.
So today we're talking about really what it means is like how to get unstuck. I think a lot of couples out there are experiencing a very transactional relationship where every
Mhm.
day kind of feels like Groundhog Day. And we're going to be going back to the evolved marriage model, the third part in leading yourself, which is vision and values. And what I realized, at least in my life, I don't know about you, but for a long time, the vision I had for myself and for the relationship I wanted was either somebody else's blueprint, so a blueprint that had been given to me and downloaded to me. Work hard, then do this, then get a job, then get a promotion, then make money, then have kids, right? Whatever. Or it was very ambiguous.
Mhm.
It was just like, I want better communication.
Yeah.
I want a better marriage,
Yeah.
right?
For me, it was my vision was always based off scarcity, based off what I didn't want to lose, what I wanted to gain,
Right.
like, or
What
or
you don't want.
avoiding
Yeah.
something bad happening. So it was like, oh, my vision for my life is, or one of my values is peace because I don't want to fight. But then by having that peace value, I'm like, oh, I don't argue, I don't fight about anything. So it was like a good excuse for me to just like ignore the problems and
Be
not talk
avoidant.
about things and be like, "Well, that's my values." And it's like, definitely wasn't useful.
Yeah. So today we're going to help viewers and listeners really understand how to create a vision for yourself, and then how that can be applied to your relationship, not in a way of trying to control, but really as kind of a how you can move forward and break that down into actionable steps so you can experience some sort of momentum, right? I think this is
Mhm.
really a big part of what people don't enjoy is that feeling of not having momentum, right? Of
Right.
things not changing, not evolving.
Yeah, feeling like you're stuck, you're not moving, you're doing the same things over and over.
Yeah.
But before we start, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay. I want to know if there's something that you have said yes to lately in your life that has not been in line with your vision.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's great. Yeah, that's great. I'm sure there has. What comes to mind? Um,
Or maybe something you said no to that helped you stay in line, like, maybe that's
you know
easier.
what? Actually, no. I think so. It's around my health. I think, yeah, maybe the best way is that, like, yeah, I should have said no to some of these things. And really what was happening is I was doing too much.
Okay.
And so I was doing jujitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, going to the gym, prepping for my run, doing the Spartan race. And one of my values is simplicity.
Mhm.
And, for me, I'm always like, what's the most direct path to help me get the results I want in the most simple way possible?
Yeah.
And also, like, how do I live a simple life? Because I don't want a life where I'm always overthinking and have too many things on the go.
Mhm.
And so I realized that, yeah, like I had said yes to too many aspects and they were like piling up. And then I really didn't know like what to prioritize and it felt very overwhelming.
Okay.
And so I ended up saying no to a lot of things and cutting out a lot of this stuff and really getting clear on like, what is it in this stage of life that I want to be, training and practicing and doing. And it was hard. I say this a lot of times in a lot of the work that we do, but if you're like successful in life and you have like a great life, a lot of times the things that you're saying no to are going to be important things.
Mhm.
This is what people don't tell you, right? It's like I could do like kickboxing, going to the gym, running, training for Spartan race, doing jujitsu, like that. Those are all important things that I could be doing. They all benefit my life.
Mhm.
But having a really good life, and this is why simplicity for me is so important, is that I have to say no to some of those things that are really important.
Right.
And so that's an example I think of, I had said yes to too many things, which brought me out of my values. And then the way to get back into my values was really just to say no, prioritize these two things and do those things well, which I think was
Mhm.
really important to me.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that.
What
Good
about
for
you?
you.
Was there something lately that maybe felt misaligned with you around decisions you made around your values? And you're like,
I think it's, some relationships in my life weren't
okay.
serving me in the way that made me feel good about myself. I think a lot of relationships that I have been keeping in my life have actually been detrimental to my mental health and my well-being. And by allowing myself to keep trying to fight for these relationships and keep trying to make these relationships work, I found that I wasn't making space for the relationships that were actually working, that actually brought value to my life, that actually lit me up. And instead, I was spending a lot of time and energy trying to make people accept me and love me. Um, Even though they couldn't accept the person that I actually am, I had to pretend to be somebody I wasn't or do things that weren't in line with what I wanted to do. And I was getting angry and, resentful. And that was like a clear sign to me that, like, okay, maybe it's time to reassess these relationships and see, are they serving me in the right way? Am I making space for the right relationships in my life? I have some amazing friends that I haven't seen in a long time because I've been prioritizing the wrong relationships.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it feels good to kind of have that clarity. Now I just have to get courageous enough to, like, go up to my friends who are beneficial with my tail between my legs and be like, "I'm sorry I've been ignoring you and making time for everyone else but you." But I know that the type of friends that are gonna be like, "We know, it's fine.
Yeah.
Welcome back."
I don't even think that they would receive it that way. I'm sure, like,
Yeah.
any of these friends would be more than happy to hear from you and would
Yeah.
probably just, like, fall right back into pace, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I think a lot of times, what you're saying can be really hard, especially if we have high stakes relationships, right?
Mhm.
Family, close friends, people we've been friends with since we were young, parents, all that kind of stuff. And um, the reality is that we do have to shift these relationships in a way that works for us, right?
Mhm.
A lot of times when we see this, it's like, people think like, oh, I have to cut this person out of my life.
Yeah.
But no, you don't actually. You just need to decide to relate to them differently,
Yeah,
right?
and if you make room for the relationships that matter most and that actually, light you up, there's a little less room for the other people. So automatically, you're not cutting them out, you just have a little bit less time for
Hmm.
them, and that's okay.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one. So we'll dive right into if you think about the model that we're talking about, and my team can put it up just as a reminder. But this is the third part of leading yourself, right? So leading yourself, there's three parts. We've already talked about self confidence, self esteem.
Mhm.
We've talked about responding instead of reacting, and now we're talking about vision and values. And then after this, we're going to go into conscious communication, which has three branches, and then genuine connection, which has three branches. So today we're talking about vision and values.
Mhm.
Um, this is really important. This is actually with all my coaching clients, one of the first things I get them to do is go through what we call the core values exercise. This is something we've done individually, right? You've done
Mhm.
yours, I've done mine. We've had family values. And I think it's just a really great way of having something written down that is like, at my core, this is what's important to me.
Yeah,
Right?
and having that foundation for yourself and having this idea of who you are and, like, clearly knowing that, deeply knowing this is who I am and at my core this is the person that I want to be and strive to be every day. Um it creates this sense of trust in yourself when you do things that are in line with that, but it also creates a sense of trust in your relationship. It's actually really attractive to see your spouse living in their integrity, being true to themselves. If I talk to Eric and he's like, one of my values is simplicity, one of my values is I'm I know your values. I just can't think
Sure.
of
Courage,
courage.
love,
Yeah,
truth,
exactly.
right?
Courage, love, truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Truth's a big one that a
yeah,
lot of people have
and
a hard time with.
and it's very yeah, it's because I know that of you, it's not as hard to accept the truth part, right? Because I
Yeah.
know that that at your core is a value that's important for you. So
Mhm.
when you are truthful, kind of catches me off guard because I'm like, oh like, my gosh, like I wouldn't necessarily say that, but you do. But I know that you're being true to yourself. So to me, it's attractive. It's attractive to know that in the end, Eric will say true things. In the end, Eric will choose love. And even when things are hard and I see that you're not at your healthiest self, and maybe that when you're not in your healthy self, you're not necessarily showing up with those values, and I know that. So when I see you, like, simplicity isn't there, you're not choosing love, you're choosing anger or whatever, I'm like, "Ooh, Eric's out of alignment right now." And
Mhm.
and because I truly know that about you, it's easy for me to see it very quickly, like, "Oh, Eric's out of alignment." And, I can try to, like, tread water and see how I can help him and just, see if he needs help. Um, but I think that having values for yourself, having values for your partner, it really helps understand deeply and be able to work together better in your partnership.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times what we want to encourage individuals and couples to do is to get clear on their own values and then speak them out to their partner. and then consistently live in those values, right? What
Mhm.
you're saying, as hard it is sometimes to see maybe me being truthful, and again, this is really something that needs to be said is oftentimes we think that being truthful means not having a filter, like
Yeah.
telling everybody everything. Like that's not actually helpful. If I see somebody and they make a mistake, um, it wouldn't be truthful for me to go out there and just tell them how horrible of a job they did. Like that wouldn't
Mhm.
be truthful, right? Maybe what's true to me is that, hey, and that person made a mistake is, just be honest about the mistake, but then encourage them, right? And kind of lift them up because what's true for me is that people learn through their mistakes.
Mhm.
And so, really important to understand that it creates a lot of emotional safety to know what your partner's values are, and to have them living in their values,
Mhm.
right? So, that about me, that I'm a simple guy. So, if there's a scenario where it's like, hey, we got to, jump through all these hoops to make this thing happen, you immediately know Eric's not going to go for that. If it
Yeah.
takes 10,000 steps to create this little step and Eric can do it in 3, he's not going to want to do those 10,000 steps.
Exactly, and sometimes I can understand why you would get frustrated in a situation where I'm like, because simplicity is so
Mhm.
important for you, if I'm saying things and acting in a way and or forcing you to follow me in a direction that takes a lot of steps and that might be complicated, I could understand why you would get, a little bit frustrated and a little more snappy because you're living out of your integrity
Mhm.
and that's very difficult for you to live outside of simplicity. So sometimes you have to do it. Sometimes you are, in situations where you have no choice but to complicate your life a little bit, but, if we can keep that to a minimum, then I understand that that helps our relationship stay healthy, and it helps you gain trust in me to know that I respect that about you. So I'm not gonna put you in those situations unless it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, and I think as we like shift towards helping individuals and couples understand the importance of this and then creating their own, first of all, if you're in a scenario in your relationship where a lot of it is just transactional, surface level, prioritized on comfort, um, where it feels like every day is kind of the same and you're not really experiencing life with each other, you're not really enjoying yourself, having fun, bringing
Mhm.
playfulness, etc. Um, it's probably because you lack vision or are disconnected to your values. What we like to say is oftentimes vision and values are the positive leverage to help you take action, right? When comfort can be an easy choice,
Mhm.
right? And so in these moments, sometimes when it's like, would be much easier for us to just at the end of the day, like sit on the couch and just watch TV and do that every night of the week. What brings us leverage to sit and just talk and laugh together is the vision that we have of our relationship, right? Is like we want a close relationship where we can laugh a lot, where we can have fun, where we can talk about anything. And that's a skill that is developed, right? There was a
Yeah.
time in our relationship where we didn't talk a lot. And then so
Yeah.
the first time we started talking, it was awkward. It was
Yeah,
weird.
and I remember coming up with that vision and being like, this I want more joy in our relationship. I want us to have hard conversations, and I was not at a place where I could have hard conversations. My self-confidence was not high enough. But it doesn't mean that I can't set that as a vision for us. It doesn't mean that I can't, work my way to attain that in a relationship. There is some learning from on my part to do. There is some sacrifice and some, things that I need to let go of in order to get better at this. But in the end, this is something we chose together. This is something that we know, as a wife, this is the kind of wife I want to be, and this is the kind of relationship I want to be in. So if I have to be in a relationship where we're never talking, where there's no joy, we're not laughing, we're not open, we're not telling each other the truth, we're not saying the real things, that's not the type of relationship I want to be in. So yes, it took some exercise. Yes, it took some learning. Yes, it took a lot of mistakes and falling out of those vision. But with practice and with time, it just becomes easier and easier to do. And then eventually it's kind of like a no brainer. You just kind of, it happens.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things to think about vision for us, think about it like the horizon, right? Like when you think it's like an ideal that you
Hmm.
move towards. So you're not always hitting your vision all the time, right? Of course, like we're going to make mistakes, we're going to fall off the wagon, all that kind of stuff. That's part of being human.
Hmm.
But the vision is like the ideal that you want to set for your relationship, and you want to be specific about that,
Hmm.
right? And so you kind of have your marriage ideals, you can write them down, but it's the horizon. It's what you're walking towards all the time. It's what you're building towards. And sometimes it might feel like you're in that example of an ideal, right? You're like, man, now this is like the moment. I'm feeling like this, feel really connected, feel really like our relationship's thriving. It's fun, it's enjoyable. Now, it's not always going to be like that.
Mhm.
There's times in our relationship where we feel disconnected and we have to talk about it. Just lately too, we've been in a situation where we're not really having a lot of sexual intimacy, and we talk it out. We're like, hey, that's something I miss. I'm just not really feeling in that place right now, confident, but I want you to know that this is a priority for me.
Mhm.
Right. And then you say the same. You're like, it's a priority for me too, babe. I'm just not feeling well. But and again, realigning to our vision of our relationship, which is we want a fulfilling sexual
Exactly,
connection,
and
right?
not just sitting back and being like, "Ah, c'est la vie, it is what it is," it's not. It's we understand that right now we're going through a season where that is the case, but we're both working and doing internal work so that we can get back to a place where we feel comfortable, where we want to be having more sex and want to be, connecting more physically and be more intimate
Yeah. But
physically intimate.
no, for sure. And if you think about, if that's the horizon, that's kind of the ideal we want to
Mhm.
move towards. Well, you then need to set goals to get there,
Yeah.
right? And so, again, we're probably not going to have a fulfilling sexual relationship we won't enjoy if we're emotionally disconnected to each other. If I'll speak for myself, but if I'm disconnected to myself, I'm
Mhm.
not really feeling, like that
Mhm.
energy. And so then these become goals, right? These become kind of markers where you're like, okay, first step, I have to reconnect to myself.
Yes.
How do I do that? I
Yeah.
go work out, I take time for myself, I do some breathing exercises, I do cold plunge, like things that for me,
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah, I'm in my body. I feel good now,
Yeah.
right? And then you might have your own goals for you
Yes.
to move towards that.
And this is why this part, vision and values, is in the leading yourself part. Because until you can be clear on your own visions, your own values, until you are making sure that those are in line with yourself, it's hard for you to be in line with the visions and values of your family, of your relationship. If yours are kind of like all over the place, and if they are all over the place and you think you're clear on them and you think, yeah, I have values and I have a vision and I've set those things for myself 5, 6 years ago. Maybe it's time to review them. Maybe it's time to look at them and be like, hey, in this new season of my life, are these still things that stand true? Are these still things that I want to be working on? I know for myself at one point, my vision and values were completely different than the ones that I have now.
Mhm.
And even now I'm realizing there's some that I have to rethink of and look over, before for me, family was such an integral, important value. And it was so important for me that my kids, saw their cousins, saw their aunts, uncles, that our family unit wasn't just the four of us, but it was, all our extended family and stuff. And now I'm realizing like, okay, maybe that was taking up a little too much room in my life and I was putting too much time and energy there. And I can put my time and energy elsewhere. And so now I'm trying to think, what's a new value or that I can still in the same line, but that isn't necessarily that deep into
Yeah. And I think it's,
family.
it's up for you to decide what type of values you want to live in. And I think for a lot of us, we have these core values. And, so family might still be a value of yours. It just looks different.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe some parts of the family aspect feels out of alignment. It doesn't mean that family's not a value to you. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And I think this is really important where we get kind of lost in the weeds sometimes. It's like, then we go out and look for a representation of our values in certain scenarios. And it's like, well, it's like, oh, because I lacked courage in that example, I can't choose courage as one of my values.
Mhm.
But it's like, no, I'm talking about these really deep intrinsic ideas that you carry with you. Is
Mhm.
family important to you? Yes, it is. That doesn't mean that you're going to be, always hanging out with your family all the time, 7 days a week. Of course not. Right.
Mhm.
But you get to decide how that value shows up in your life. And I think this is why it's like in leading yourself, because a lot of times what happens is when we have these values, when we have this vision, we actually move into control, right? And we go into like, okay, so I have this vision of a great relationship. So I need to get my partner to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, no, that's actually not good. That would actually go against probably a lot of your values. Instead, you want to think about, okay, this is my vision for the relationship. So what can I do in order to bring that into the relationship, knowing that other people can have an experience of that, right?
Mhm.
And I think a lot of times what happens, we're like, I can't have this vision because of X, Y, and Z outside of myself, or this can't be one of my values. I can't have a great marriage because my partner doesn't want to be, in a relationship. The reality is that you can, if that's still important to you, if your value is still relationship and you want to be in a great relationship. Maybe it's just, hey, right now that person is not on board with me. My partner doesn't really want to do the work with me. Well, how can I be in relationship with them and still live that value out
Yeah.
in this? Because, I think about in our relationship, there was a time when, I was just angry all the time. I hadn't worked with a lot of my anger. I was just a rage monster. I was like punching holes through walls. Like it was very unsafe. You know what I mean? And in that case, like if one of your values was like peace, right? And you're like, I can't have this type of rage around me, around the environment, etc. Like you would have some tough decisions to make. And sometimes living in your values means you have to make those tough decisions. And so a tough decision, which we kind of worked through it, but it was like, this is unacceptable. Like I will no longer live in this type of environment. I will no longer let my children live in this type of environment where a grown man is running around yelling and screaming and punching holes in walls. That's a hard no for me,
Mhm.
right? And so that would be an example of, we call negative leverage, which is, Eric, you change or I'm leaving,
Mhm.
right? And sometimes we have to use that negative leverage in order to create the impetus of change. Like that's why I changed. I was like, not only for you, but I changed because like I was looking at Francis and he was hitting stuff, and he was like 4 years old and throwing stuff. And I was like, oh man, I'm just like recreating this. So as you can see now, leverage for the vision that I wanted. But if your value was peace and I kept being like that, you probably would have had some really tough choices to make,
Mhm.
to say, I'm sorry, in order for me to live in my value, I cannot continue to be in a relationship with you like this. And since you're unwilling to change and we worked at it, I have to end the marriage.
Mhm.
And like your values, this is really, really important because your vision helps you move towards what you want, but your values help you overcome the barriers to get to that vision.
Mhm.
Right. And so in this moment, it's like, if one of your values is peace and you're like, I want to live a life of peace, that's so important to me, right? Is to be at peace. Doesn't mean conflict avoidant. It means that you want to find peace within yourself so that the choices you're making feel good to you and
Mhm.
you're at peace with. Well, in order to have a really heavy and hard conversation, either together or with a third party around my rage and my anger and the damage it's doing to you, to our family, to our kids, to our environment, you need to connect to your value of peace.
Mhm.
You need to say, that is really important to me. Because if you didn't have that, you would just then fall into avoidance and not deal. I'm not going to have this tough conversation because
Mhm.
there's not enough leverage, right?
Yeah, and that reminds me because I know when things were tough in our relationship, that is something that I used to do often is I would because I was a new mom, because, I knew you were going through a hard time. Like I knew that this rageful, angry person wasn't Eric. Like there was something inside of you that was quite unhappy and I knew you'd get out of it. You just needed help. And so a lot of me was a lot of parts of me was like, "Oh, one of my values is forgiveness." And I made up that value to excuse the fact that I would kind of blow off the other values, which was, peace, which was family, which was, back then I had a different set of values, but I couldn't even tell you what they were because a lot of times I would brush them off. I would blow them off because I was like, well, one of my new values is forgiveness, and I must do everything to forgive Eric. And so, you would punch a hole through a wall, and then I'd be like, well, Kate, forgive him, because one of your values is forgiveness. But what was happening is I created this value to like excuse your behavior, and then by doing that, I pushed away the other values, the other things that were important for me. And because I was at a place where I was unhealthy myself and I wasn't getting the help that I needed and I was isolating, I didn't keep true to those values. And that could have destroyed our marriage. And had I been more true to my values and had I put my foot down and said, no, enough is enough. Um, I mean, who knows where we would be, but in my head, now that I think about it, we'd probably be at a stronger place because there would be a lot less hurt and there would be a lot less forgiveness and there'd be a lot less things that we'd have to like forget about, right? And forgive each other for because of the anger, because of the bad things that went on. There was a lot of trauma and damage caused in the relationship that we're still working through. So parts of me are like, this is why having a vision, having values is so important. And it's so important no matter what is going on for you to stay true to them and stay true to yourself. Because if you don't, you're putting aside your own well-being, and that is it's not good. It's not good for yourself, and it's definitely not good for the long-term relationship.
Mhm.
You know, we get so angry and resentful to the other person because we feel like we have to shut our values down and we have to like pretend they don't exist and or change them to pretend we have other values because well this one isn't working so I guess I can't have that value so I think you bringing that up is very important because I think oftentimes we do ignore our values and we do we forget to use them as leverage to push us towards our vision.
Yeah.
You know, if my vision is I want to have a healthy relationship with Eric, well, continuing to forgive him for his childlike behavior was not what was going to get us there.
Yeah, and I think, if you're listening to this, understand that, as humans, we often bring in justifications to avoid facing hard things,
Mhm.
right? That's a human thing. This is why, like, getting help, getting a third party to like give you some introspection, like all kinds of stuff around doing the work is really important. And if you're in a situation where you realize you're sacrificing parts of yourself, that's probably because you're either not living in your values or you don't have a vision for how you want to move forward. And so this is really important, right? So as we're kind of wrapping this up, first of all, understand that without a vision and without living in your values, you're most likely going to choose comfort at all costs,
Mhm.
right? And so you're probably just going to do whatever's most comfortable. And that can lead to in a relationship, like not revealing yourself, not opening yourself up to your partner intimately, not having hard conversations about truth, right? Things like that. And so what I would recommend is, first of all, think about the vision that you want for yourself, right? So what kind of life do you want to live? And, because we're leading yourself here, I actually recommend you not doing this within relationship, right? Just think about your own life to start with.
Mhm.
So really take ownership of your own life. How am I living? Am I working in the job that I want? Do I have the freedom that I want? Am I doing the hobbies that I like? And understand that you're probably coming up with a lot of reasons why you can't have this life. But again, moving back to, hey, if I can start moving towards this life if I want. I'll never forget, the life that we have now really kind of started, I guess, almost 4 years ago when we sat on the couch together and we're like, what kind of life do you want to live? And we kind of started dreaming this up, traveling in the summers, having our kids home more often, like being a little more flexible with our time. All that just came from one idea of wanting more freedom in our lives.
Mhm.
And so again, and it's always like a work in progress, right? We're always kind of working towards that journey, towards that vision that we want. And so think about that first. What's the vision for yourself? And then start to break down some behaviors, some choices that you can make. In a great framework, I like to use sand, pebbles, rocks, and boulders. But essentially, if you think about sand being things that you can do every day, pebbles being something you do every week, then rocks once a month, and then boulders once a season, you can break down action steps into all of those, right? If you want to, let's say, experience more time freedom, well, then maybe that means that every day you want to be, not looking at your email till 9 a.m. and closing off your work computer at 5 p.m. And that's what you want to do for maybe you can't do it 5 days this week. But maybe you're like, I'm going to do that 3 days this week and I'm going to do it 3 days consistently every week for this month. That's the start, right? That's where you start. You start by shutting off work. And then you keep taking step after step after step, and you can draw this out. And that's going to help you move towards your vision because you're setting action steps and goals to help you move towards your vision. And the more you justify why you can't do those things, the more disconnected then you are from that vision and those values. So I think starting there would be a good frame of mind.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. And so this kind of wraps up for leading yourself. And in the next episode, we're going to be jumping into conscious communication, the first branch, which is all about building trust. So stay tuned.